First and foremost, Bob Martinka leads by example in bird conservation. Most of his life has been devoted to improving and protecting natural resources, both in his professional pursuits and private interests. His ability to photograph birds in their natural habitat without disturbance and the quality of his photos are equaled by few and the envy of many. Bob served a lengthy tenure, 16 years, I believe, as a board member for Montana Audubon, and about that long and continuing, serving our own Last Chance Audubon as a board member. He has also served on the Montana Bird Records Committee, and this past June, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from Montana Audubon at the Bird Festival in Lewistown. His donation of 60 high-quality bird photographs taken at hotspots around the state is used in exhibits here at Montana Wild in the, as educational displays in the auditorium next door. His documentation of bird sightings locally, across Montana, nationally, and internationally using eBird benefits the quantity and quality of data available to researchers. Because of his knowledge, birding passion, expertise in bird identification, and skill as a photographer, he is the go-to member of Last Chance Audubon for just about any conservation topic. He has devoted his life to sensible use and protection of the natural world through education, habitat conservation, and environmental advocacy, the foundation of the Last Chance Audubon mission. Always willing to share his knowledge and even his secret birding spots with aspiring birders, Bob Martinka is truly a birder emeritus in Montana. Join me in giving Bob a warm welcome.
Well, thank you, Janice. I need to meet this guy. That's quite an introduction. So anyway, well, let's get right into it, I guess. Yeah, why Ethiopia? I guess, lots of people ask me that, and I guess I don't have a really good answer for that other than it's someplace that I haven't been before. But when I got to looking into the possibility of a new birding trip, of course, each one I do is going to be my last one, and my wife isn't here tonight. But anyway, we'll see if this is my last one or not. I hope not. But anyway, I looked around a little bit. I've been with a fellow by the name of Forrest Rowland, who is a bird guide for Rockjumper birding. And he's just super individual in terms of his not only his personality, but obviously his birding skills, his general knowledge of lots of different subjects. And I saw that he was going to be leading a trip to Ethiopia, and I started to look into Ethiopia and decided, hey, that looks like a great place to visit and do some more birding. When you think, or when I guess initially I thought of Ethiopia, it's kind of it's north of a lot of the areas, Kenya and Tanzania and so forth, that are the big tourist places, the big places people go for seeing wildlife and birds and whatever. But Ethiopia is getting up there toward the Sahara Desert a little bit, and I just didn't know what it looked like. And when you think of lots of places in Africa, it looks a lot like this photo here just to start this whole thing. And that's a kind of a broad plain with scattered acacia trees out there. Well, just a little bit of looking at Ethiopia and looking at the details in the books and the other reports and that sort of thing. Ethiopia is way more than just a flat plain with a number of acacia trees out there. And looking at the bird lists and It has something like 30 endemic birds that are found nowhere else, only in that country. Another maybe 20 or so near endemics that are only found kind of in the surrounding areas. And it just really, really appealed to me. And so I signed up, waited impatiently, I guess, to make sure that we got enough people. They have a maximum of eight people for these trips. We ended up with 7 until kind of the end, and then we had one individual from Poland joined us, and so we got our full complement of 80, and we were off. The other thing, for those of you who read the news in depth, is you may have heard about a few things that are going on over in that part of the world. Up in the northern part of Ethiopia, there's kind of a tribal area, an area that it's called the Tigray area, and there's been some war going on up there. Very, very bad stuff going on up there. Just recently, about a month or so before this trip, they came and ended up with some sort of a peace agreement, which apparently held pretty well while we were there. There's some other areas around there, and I'll get into that a little bit later on here, where there's a little bit of civil unrest occasionally, and it's a big tribal area. There's different tribes scattered all over this area, and just culturally, it's just extremely diverse. Culturally, landscape, geology, archaeology, the diversity is there, and so it really intrigued me. So I guess we can probably get the lights now, and we'll give it a start. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming, and we also have quite a number of people online here. So again, thank you, and hope you enjoy. So here we go. Ethiopia, long way from Helena. The way I got there was fly to Denver. Had a layover in Denver. Of course, went out and did some birding while I was there. From Denver over to, well, either London or other places in Europe. It's a 10-hour flight. From those places down to Addis Ababa, the only real international airport there. It's another 7 to 8 hours, so it's a lot of travel time to get there. It's not a real tourist destination. Give you a little bit better idea of where it's situated. It's situated in what they call the Horn of Africa, and I guess let's see. I guess you can see. I don't know if you can see my pointer here, but I guess that's the Horn they're talking about there. But anyway, surrounded by Somalia. Somalia is it's a country that, well, it's had civil unrest problems and probably a non-functional government for a long time. This border with Somalia, if you can see my pointer there, that part of Somalia, lots of maps you look at, that's a dotted line. And so apparently that's not really a real well-established boundary line between countries. Ethiopia is land-bound. The only access it really has to the sea is through this little town or little country of Djibouti. And it's a pretty small country, but apparently they maintain a pretty good relationship with Ethiopia. Road traffic on the road from Addis Ababa to Djibouti is the only road that we really traveled on that you see a lot of traffic on. And a lot of that traffic is oil. It's double oil tankers, just one after another, and not a fun road to travel on. North, Eritrea apparently has pretty good relationship with Ethiopia. In fact, they were part of that civil unrest that was going on up there. Don't know too much about Sudan, but Sudan and South Sudan, I know have had problems. Kenya is I don't know if a friend is the right word, but they have good relationship with Ethiopia. Ethiopia itself, the real geographical and physiographical thing there that really kind of makes the country interesting is the Great Rift Valley. And what the Rift Valley is a couple of the tectonic plates in the world where they're, I guess, pulling apart, apparently. And it's just a really interesting area. You can see on this map where there's lots of lakes and so forth along there. There's some rivers run out of there, the Awash River. And that ends up in northern Ethiopia in a place called the Danakil Depression. And the Danakil Depression actually has one of the lowest areas, 460 feet below sea level, one of the lowest areas in the world. And I guess from what they tell me, it's just an unworldly place. There are the rivers that run down there. They all kind of like the Salt Lake, they dissipate. There's almost bubbling lava pools down there. It's an area that they claim has one of the hottest places in the world, or the hottest place in the world. So quite interesting from that perspective. And elevationally, you can see again a couple of places in Ethiopia that are quite high, around in the 15,000 foot range, 14 to 15,000 feet. You know, the highest place in Montana is what, 12,700 feet or something like that. So very high country. They say it's actually on average one of the highest countries in the world. So just a few facts, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of facts, but there's some interesting ones. It's about almost 3 times the size of Montana, but population 120 million people in an area that's only 3 times the size as Montana. So it's quite heavily populated. Although the population is scattered into some major cities, and it's scattered along the Rift Valley because that's where the most fertile lands are, apparently. So, and the population is increasing quickly. Lots of young people there. I already mentioned distance from Montana. It's about 8,900 air miles from Montana. Languages, one major language, well, I shouldn't say one major, there's one official language, a language called Amharic, and 4 other distinct languages that are spoken. These are kind of tribal regions historically, and they still maintain their languages, and about 72 dialects. And so if you're traveling around there, you know, it can be a little bit tough. Again, it's not a tourist destination. There's trekkers go there. Obviously, there's very few birders go there, but it's not like the areas to the south. Religion, 44% Christian, about 1/3 Muslim. I guess some other Christian is probably Catholic, maybe. Geography, topography, I've already talked a little bit about that. Economy is primarily agricultural dominated. Small grains are the biggie, but coffee originated in Ethiopia. The Turks kind of perfected it, how to roast it and everything, but it originated in Ethiopia. Apparently, there's a little bit of mining, and I understand that maybe they have discovered some oil over in the western part of the country now. So, and again, the landscape, the Rift Valley, the high plateaus, I've already talked a bit about those. Before I get too much more into this, I could talk for an hour here just about the culture and all the tremendous variety and the different aspects of this country. And I don't want to bore you with those. I'm going to do a little bit more of that, and then we'll get into the birds and a lot of what you all came here to see. So the beginning of our trip, we did have one day when everybody arrived. Most of the planes come in early in the morning, and so we had one full day in Addis Ababa, and we had the opportunity to go visit like their national museum and one other museum. And to me, the neat part of that was we got to see Lucy. And if you aren't familiar with Lucy, in about 1974, Lucy was found there, or parts of Lucy. And Lucy was one of the first hominids at that point in time that they knew walked erect. And you know, one of the, you know, not ancestors of ours, but an offshoot of who we are today. And since that time, there have been some others, older hominids found. But anyway, that was kind of neat. And this picture you see here is actually Lucy, and the brown parts are parts of that, or parts of Lucy that they found and kind of stitched together. So that was pretty neat. Here we are at our hotel in Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa, by the way, is a big town. It's a big city. It's like about 4 million plus, and growing very, very quickly, apparently. Our tour was for 17 days. We had 8 paying participants. We had the Rockjumper guide, and here is Forrest Rowland right here. Forrest, by the way, lives in Livingston, but it worked for Rockjumper, and Rockjumper is a South African company. So besides those, we had 3 drivers, one of whom was, I think the one was an individual, his name was Cisse, and he was the I guess the tour that owned the tour company that provided the vehicles and so forth. Mostly on a lot of these tours that I've taken, or most of the tours that I've taken, we have maybe a 12 or a 15 person van. That doesn't work in Ethiopia. While there are pluses and minuses to the van versus what we had, we ended up with three Land Cruisers. So we had 4 people in each of those for the total of 12 people that we had. The reason the vans don't work is the roads just are not good for vans. Some of them are steep. Many of them are rocky, ungraded, and so forth. Next to these Land Cruisers is a really very typical transportation mode in Ethiopia, and that's donkey-drawn carts. In the rural areas in particular, that is probably the main means of transport of people and of goods. You don't see a lot of vehicles in some of the rural areas for sure. So what you do see in the rural areas is something that you see in Montana, at least in the spring and the fall in Montana. That's the livestock on the road. Mostly in the form, there are cattle there, but I think cattle are far outnumbered by goats in particular, and there's also a fair number of sheep in some areas. Just give you an example of they run these livestock herds, just run back and forth on these roads, I guess, until to get to different pastures and so forth. One of the other things that we ran into on a number of the roads was military checkpoints, and we ran into those every day. And we were warned, and you might probably understand the reason we were warned is we were warned to put our walkie-talkies away. We communicated between our 3 vehicles with walkie-talkies, and you go through a military checkpoint and they get a little suspicious when you're doing that. And so we put them away. And I know also you won't see any pictures of those either. We didn't think cameras probably would be too well accepted either. So just a couple more things here. A typical Ethiopian meal, for those who you might be interested in something like that, is kind of a combo of different helpings of different items, and they are put on a kind of a real thin pancake type of a layer there. And then to eat, what the people do is they tear a bit of that little pancake thing and they wrap it around the food, and that's how they eat. They don't use a fork. Very few of the people on the trip partook of that opportunity because of the spiciness of the foods. So, and certainly I was one of them. Daughter Melissa here did partake of that a time or two until it got a little tough. I should mention, I'm going to go through some things that I'll fall back on. Well, one of the participants in this thing was my daughter, Melissa Ackerman. And that was just an absolute wonderful thing to be able to travel with, with the daughter. After we're both big travelers, and this was just something she wanted to do. So just one other quickie here. Occasionally, if we couldn't get breakfast because we were leaving too early or for some other reason that we're too far away from the place for lunch or something like that, Each one of these vehicles, or I guess all of the vehicles, had a little bit of chairs and cooking facilities. So they'd cook us some eggs in the morning and have other things, coffee, tea, whatever. That was a really nice treat. That was delightful. So, okay, here we are. And just real quick, I'm going to go down through a couple of things here. Right here is Rose Leach. Rose is from Missoula. I've been on several other trips with her. Just a great birder, great individual. Glad she could come along. This gentleman here is from Colorado, southwestern Colorado, Gunnison. One fellow here is from Rochester, Minnesota. We had a couple from Vancouver, Washington. Here's daughter Melissa right here. And this is the gentleman from Poland, although I believe he's living in Switzerland right now, and he's just an exceptionally good birder. So that was our crew. This gives you an idea of the area that we did cover. eBird anymore, I don't know how many of you are familiar with eBird, the Cornell University kind of a universal birding database. But anyway, every bird that we saw, we entered into an eBird checklist. And all of these dots that you see here represent one of those checklists, and there's 107 of them. So we had 107 different checklists in those 17 days. The farthest south we went right here was an area that was about just 30 miles from the border of Kenya. And the farthest north we went, which is about roughly 400 miles from the furthest south spot, is right up in here. That's actually in a different drainage. It's in a drainage that's called the Gemma River drainage. And the Gemma River runs into the Blue Nile, and the Blue Nile, of course, runs up north, up into Cairo and into the Mediterranean Sea. So quite a bit of distance we covered there. One other thing I want to mention is originally, if you see where I assume you're seeing where that is, where I'm circling there. We were going to stay, we did stay one day up here, but after the second night up there, we were going to take this road down through this area right in here, down to a little town called Nagali that we were going to stay at, and then do some birding over in here. Well, a week or two before before we arrived and we're supposed to do that, we were kind of, or not we, the organizers of the trip were told that maybe that wasn't a good idea because there's an outfit called the Oromia Liberation Front that had shown some preference, or not some preference, some presence there. And they weren't always happy to see foreigners come around. And so anyway, we had to backtrack and take a different route. And we did miss a few of the endemic species, but we did very well without that. So again, Addis, just so you know, you can relocate. Addis Ababa is right here. So most of the time we spent, or 2/3 of the time we spent south of there, and the rest of the time a little bit north of there. So some of the countryside, and I don't have a lot of pictures of that, but just to give you a feel of some of it, other than the flatlands, you can see all of the fields there, mostly small grains. Essentially all of those fields, other than in a few little areas that we went through, essentially all these fields are hand plowed and hand harvested. So obviously it's manual labor is what runs the agriculture in Ethiopia. Rural family life. This is probably just a little typical enclave for one local family that we see as we're passing through these areas. One of the interesting things, if you look at the shape of this hut, depending on where we were, which basically tribe was predominant in a particular area. That's what the huts look like. As you moved on to a different area, they had a different architecture and a different shape. It was just kind of interesting to follow that aspect. Another really interesting thing is I don't think I saw a piece of barbed wire in this whole trip. But if you look right here in the front, what that is, that's the fencing. And that's, they just cut these acacia trees, maybe mainly with the huge spikes on them, and just pile them up, and that keeps the goats or the sheep. That's what they use for fences. Other places, they plant cactus that grow real close together and do all sorts of things that act as fences. So it's probably more effective than our barbed wire is here, I would guess. Typical small villages here. Most of the transportation in those small villages are these little bluish tuk-tuks here, little three-wheel vehicles, not very expensive to buy. So these are just kind of typical in areas like that. A few motorbikes, not a lot of them. When you did see them, it wasn't just one person riding on them. 3 people was probably the average, and we saw as many as 6 people on one of these. And so I guess that's a pretty efficient way to do it. One of the other things that really caught my eye, and maybe this is common in other areas that I'm not familiar with, but there is a lot of construction going on in some of the cities. Some of the smaller cities anyway. Well, even in Addis Ababa. And if you look at the scaffolding here, the scaffolding is tree stems. And the tree stems, I think, are probably eucalyptus, which is an introduced species, but anyway, eucalyptus. And this scaffolding, I saw buildings as high as 10 stories where they were using these eucalyptus poles for scaffolding. And I'll tell you, you wouldn't get me up on one of those. Interesting. They are bolted together. They aren't just tied together. I did notice that. So that's, I don't know if it would make me feel any better or not. Laundry day, almost every stream that you pass, there would be people out doing the laundry in the streams. The people, the young, lots of young kids. And they would see these vehicles of ours coming, and they knew that was something different, and they would gather around you. And some of them were probably maybe wanting a little bit of money or something, but many of them, what they wanted was pens, for school. And by the time the trip was over, we were out of pens, and so if you'd known ahead of time, that's really would have been a good thing to take there. I don't know what the average age is. This guy caught my eye, I guess, because he has the same color hair as me. But anyway, I liked that hat that he was wearing, and I thought maybe about trying to get one of those, and I never was successful in finding one, unfortunately. So these are the kinds of facilities we stayed in. Quaint, nice, but quaint. Mosquito nets in almost all of them, although we never did we ran into a few mosquitoes, but not much for mosquitoes. Maybe because they've been in a very severe 2-year drought in Somalia and in Ethiopia. Okay, now we're going to start getting into the meat of some of this. One of the things when you talk about Ethiopia and you're going to do a trip like this is, of course, look at the wildlife potential. And one of the, well, not one of, the top animal that almost everybody on the trip wanted to see was an Ethiopian wolf. And these Ethiopian wolves are the rarest canid in the world. Fewer than 500 of them apparently remain in the world. And this one place we were going to go has the majority of those. And we were lucky enough to find, we found 2 single ones and a group of 3. And this was in a place called the Bale, B-A-L-E Mountains National Park. And the Seneti Plateau is a real high elevation plateau that runs from probably 12,000 feet up to, I think the highest we were on that plateau was 13,500 feet. And I'll show you what some of the vegetation looks like. But anyway, that was quite neat to be able to see that Ethiopian wolf. They look a lot more like our coyotes than they really do our wolf. But although they have a real reddish hinge to them, more like a red fox. what they apparently key in on is something called an African mole rat, which is a great big rodent that apparently maybe weighs as much as a pound. And so wouldn't take many of those to make a nice meal, I guess. A little better look at the plateau. This is just a little kind of a sidelight I wanted to throw in here, but when we were way up on that plateau, kind of way out in the distance, and I took this picture with my telephoto lens. Well, here was 4 people walking across there with guns. And I was afraid to ask what they might be doing up there. And so I don't know, but anyway, that's just one of the things you run into. This is a really neat plant you see up in those high elevations, a giant lobelia plant at the high elevations. This gives you a little idea. After that high elevation, we went down into it's probably maybe a 5,000 foot, 6,000 foot down to get down to another drainage down here. But here's Bob and Melissa walking back toward the vehicles. Photo by Rose Leach. Again, I mentioned that they've had a very severe drought there, and all you have to do is look at a place like this real flat plain that's probably normally under good rain water conditions, is probably still pretty green, because their rainy season is supposed to run from about it ends about the first or the middle of October, and we started in the middle of November, so you would think there would still be plenty of green grass around, but there wasn't. And there was a specific bird here we wanted to find, and the bird is called a masked lark, and it had disappeared from this area. It had been in this area for many years. About 10 years ago, it had disappeared after many years. About 10 years ago, it reappeared, and we were able to find some of them. So this is one of the pretty neat endemic birds found in the area. So, okay, now we're going to start going through a bunch of birds, and I'll talk a little bit about some of them, not too much about some of the others. We saw swifts many of the days, maybe half or more of the days we would see swifts flying. One particular day we were near a wetland, and we saw a huge flock of maybe 75 or 100 of them that was made up of different species. And one of the favorite things I like to do with the camera is to take pictures of flying birds, and you'll see a lot of flying bird pictures here. And I was lucky enough to be able to catch a few of them. This alpine swift is it winters down here. I think it's a European species where it breeds. Not sure about the mottled swift, but they presented a pretty good opportunity to get some pictures of them, some of the better pictures I've ever gotten of swifts. A few of you who have been around me, when I see some swifts here in Montana trying to take pictures of, it's a pretty good laugh opportunity. So, how about you, Brian? Yeah, well, yeah. Ibis, with probably a half a dozen different species of ibis. This is one of the more attractive ones. Probably saw ibises every day. Some of them are kind of associated with wetland areas, and others are up in dryland habitats. Hadada ibis. A lot of wading type birds, herons and egrets. The squawko heron, that was actually a new bird for me, although I had been in other parts of Africa, but I had never seen this bird before. So nice bird. A few of the ones that we did see we have over here, cattle egrets, which of course are kind of sort of an invasive species here. We had cattle egrets, great egrets, which we don't see very often in Montana, and a few others, but they had lots of other variety of different egrets and herons. In probably grade school through high school and into college, the name Martinka, you know, how kids are with nicknames. And my nickname was either Tink or Tinker. And one of the birds that you find in Africa and some other places over in that part of the world are called tinker birds. And so this is certainly one that I wanted to get a picture of. And And yeah, this is a red-fronted tinkerbird here. A double-toothed barbet. We had about maybe a half a dozen species of those. If you look at the bill on this bird, you can see some little kind of protrusions there. I guess that's where that gets the name double tooth. Roget's rail. This is a high level bird, high elevation bird around a wetland, but this one was around a wetland. But we found those up in that high elevation, 10, 11, 12,000 feet out where there's no water to speak of. And so it's sort of a rail that has adapted to some higher elevations, probably because it's a little bit wetter. Owls are another, everybody likes owls. And of course, owls, when you're out on your own and don't know too much about an area, are really tough to find. But what has happened in this country and in other countries for that matter, is that the locals know, while there's not a lot of birders in Ethiopia, in fact, there's very few, but they know when birders are around, they want to know where owls are. And so they're pretty good at keeping an eye on where the owls might be. And so when you come by, of course, they see these vehicles, these Toyota vehicles, they know it must be birders or somebody like that. And so they'll come up to you and they'll tell you, hey, you want to see an owl? And we know where there are some. Of course, they make a few bucks by doing this too from the guides. And so that's how we found a number of these right here. This one over here, this Abyssinian owl, one of the national parks that we were at, there's an old retired park ranger there that goes out apparently almost every night, listens for owls, and is really very, very, very good at finding out where they roost during the day. And so 2 different times we came by that area, he'd hail us down, or they'd be they would know we're coming, and they would find where some of these owls are, and he'd kind of lead us to them. Not with a GPS. He had a good enough memory that he would walk up, a half a mile or somewhere and find them hidden in one of these trees. So pretty interesting. This particular one was found, some people told us about this one in a place where we were looking for some lunch. Look at the size of the eyes on that owl. Pretty amazing. Blue-headed kukal, common birds, Ethiopian siskin, or at least common in Ethiopia. The Hugland's white eye, Ethiopian white eye, they used to be called. Raptors, wow. What a show Ethiopia put on for us with raptors. 44 species of hawks, of eagles, of this included falcons, that sort of thing. So anyway, lesser spotted owl. Here's another bird that I had heard was there. Surprising. Some of you here in the audience may have some idea what that bird is. If you look right there on the top of the head, that's actually a golden eagle. Golden eagles are found there, and at least in the high elevations, very few. We were pretty lucky to see one, but they are found there. So pretty neat to see one of those. Shell ducks are more common in saltwater areas, along ocean areas and so forth, but up in these high elevation spots, this is a very localized population of those things. But more eagles, imperial eagle. This is pretty, we saw several of these long crested eagles. That's pretty neat bird. Ethiopia does not have the huge populations of mammals, of big mammals like this, ungulates that Kenya and Tanzania and some of the other countries to the south have. But it does have some pretty neat critters. And this is one of them, Mountain Nyala. Again, this was found in one of the national parks we were in, Bali National Park. And pretty abundant there, and pretty tame. So good picture opportunities. You all know what these are, but this isn't the typical zebra that you see. The typical zebra, the plain zebra, I think they call it. This is called a Grevy's zebra. And if you look at the stripes on it, they're much much thinner than the stripes on a regular plain zebra. We did see plain zebra, but these are pretty unique. Carmine bee eaters. Bee eaters are one of the neater birds there for sure. Carmine bee eater was probably the most common one. So lots of those. Ethiopian bee eater. This is a bee eater that I think had been recently separated species-wise, or at least renamed. It used to be called a blue-throated bee eater, but the name has been changed recently to Ethiopian bee eater. Gorgeous birds. You know, we did see some pretty neat areas, some pretty scenic areas, and this falls was certainly one of them. One of our interesting the things that happened to us there when we stopped to see this particular falls. It was crawling with that, and there was a big, really high-end hotel right above here that was, you know, I don't know, $400 or $500 a night hotel or something like that, they told us. And it was full of military people all around there. Well, we found out that the prime minister of Ethiopia was just about to visit there a little bit later after, after we left. And that was kind of interesting because about 2 days before that, we were in a bigger town that had a hotel. It was a hotel chain named after Haile Selassie, if you remember that name from a long time ago. And anyway, about 6 o'clock that morning, we were getting phone calls and knocks on the door that be ready to vacate your room because the military are here with their sniffing dogs. And so every room that we were in, or every room in that hotel at 6 a.m. was going to be visited by a dog with a military guy behind it. Just to make sure there were no bombs or whatever else in that room for the prime minister. So there's something about us that attracted the prime minister. One other thing about this particular look here, this particular slide, you can't see it all, but right below this falls here, there's a number of crocodiles just kind of laying there, apparently in wait for a fish to fall over the falls. I don't know, that's what they told us anyway. But this one was just kind of laying a little bit lower down. Maybe he just had his morning breakfast or something and just kind of laid there about 20 feet in front of us. White-faced whistling duck, about 3 different species of whistling ducks we had there. Neat bird. Shorebird types, this Senegal thick knee, we saw a number of those around wetland areas. These lapwings are kind of like a killdeer. I mean, they're in the plover family, and we probably had at least 5 or 6 or 7 different species of lapwings, and so another interesting bird. But most of the lapwings are out in dryland country, which occasionally you see our killdeer, of course, out in the dry land areas too. But anyway, lots of lapwings. Sunbird right here. Sunbird is kind of almost the African equivalent of our hummingbirds in some ways. They work on flowers and that sort of thing. And this was a really interesting bird here. I don't know how well you can see that's not very well in focus. But anyway, this particular bird, the somber rock chat, is only found in lava flows, unvegetated lava flows. And so to get to see these things, you got to walk on unvegetated lava flows, what this kind of looks like. And you can get a better idea of it by this. This is one of our people right here trying to walk through that lava flow. And we were fortunate we only had one accident by one person, I think, falling during a trek through there. So it worked out. It worked out okay, I guess, but we did get the bird. Red-billed oxpecker, this particular oxpecker, and I think a lot of you have probably seen pictures, and it's farther south, but they're in the areas that have Cape Buffalo. you'll see oxpeckers sitting on the back, and they sit on the back of these animals and pick the insects off of them, ticks or whatever, I guess. And I don't know if we have any yellow-billed. I don't know if there are yellow-billed ones here up where we were or not. But anyway, a lot of red-billed oxpeckers, probably working on sheep and other birds up here in Ethiopia. Barefaced go-away birds, those were fairly common. You know, it's hard. This is a classic here, these secretary birds, and it's just, you know, just really neat to see those. Actually, this was a life bird for a lot of people. But just the, you know, just the background here in these acacia flats, and you see these mounds here. Of course, those are termite mounds. Those are built by termites, and the area that we covered from south to north, there were 3 different kinds of termite mounds that we found. I assume were just different species of termites, and one of the neatest ones was a mound that it kind of started out like this, but then it had a long high chimney that probably reached up to, you know, 10, 12, 14 feet or something like that. And just really kind of neat to see the difference there. But I assume some of you are getting some idea why these are called secretary birds. I don't know, maybe you can explain it better than me, but it seems like a long time ago when women probably had bun hairdos and they were secretaries or writing something, they used to stick their pens up there. Is that right? Does that sound right to somebody? So anyway, so I didn't make that up. Anyway. And yeah, we had 5 or 6 different kinds of bustards, and the only one I put a picture of in here, I have pictures of all of them, but it is this Arabian bustard, because it's an endemic one to Ethiopia. And anyway, that's a carmine bee eater riding on the back, and there's a reason for that. Kind of maybe in some ways the same as the oxpecker bird, but anyway. They sit on the back of these things, I guess, and then as that bird is kind of walking along, it picks up insects. And then when they see an insect, they fly off and they go down and get it, deal with it, and probably hop back up again. Another one I don't have a picture of here is called a Cory bustard that looks very, very similar to these, but it doesn't have the spots here on the side. And the Cory bustard is the largest, the heaviest flying bird in the world. It's you know, quite a bird to see, and you don't see them flying very often. These I did see some flying Arabian bustards, and I actually got some pictures of one flying. So a couple more larks, sparrow type birds or lark birds. These are all tough because they're in these grassland area, open areas, and really hard to get pictures of them, but these we just happened to, male, female here, just happened to see sitting on some sticks. So it made much easier picture taking. Most of the pictures I got of the larks that we have were flying pictures, and it's hard to get those pictures where they're really kind of sharp. Although here was kind of a lucky one. When this bird took off, I just happened to be ready and got a picture of it flying. It's kind of a pretty neat little bird, green-winged Patillion. Barbets, we probably had a half a dozen different kinds of barbets, and again, these birds are pretty easy to pick out which group they're in by just looking at the size of that bill, the size and the shape of that bill. But sit out in the open fairly frequently, so pretty easy to spot. Yeah, eastern plantain eater. Seeing it in some riparian type areas. I'm going to go a little faster here because again, I'm talking too much. Lots of hornbills. We probably had about 5 or 6 different kinds of hornbills. And they're of course very, very, well, I don't know if attractive is the right word, but certainly distinctive with those bills. Another thing that really kind of surprised me, we are getting farther north here into where you might expect to see camels. But there were a lot of camels in Ethiopia. And apparently, besides just being used for transporting goods of one sort or another, apparently they are milked. camel milk, and didn't get an opportunity to try that, but might have been kind of interesting. You can see with this bunch here, you can see a herder right there. It looks like a woman washing clothes here, and there's one of the two different cormorant species that we had on the trip right there. So I think daughter Melissa took this picture with my camera, if I remember right. So fishing, again, a lot of lakes along here, and a lot of those lakes are really different. You would think they would be similar along the Rift Valley, but some of them are very shallow and murky looking. Others are nice blue water, deep lakes. And I don't know how many of them contain, I assume most of them contain fish of some sort, but one of them here in particular was apparently fishing. A fishery was pretty important. And I don't, the question is, do they fish year round in these things? And, with all the people that there are they decimating those fish populations? It's really hard to tell. You get a pretty good idea here at this fish market. All those bundles that you see there are gill nets, I think. And they'll put those out at night, I guess, go out and pick them up in the morning and pick the fish out of them and then sell them at the market here. So this tree, by the way, these are gorgeous. These are fig trees. And I guess there's a number of different kinds of fig trees, but these are big old things. A lot of them seem to be 6, 8, maybe even 10 feet at the base, and just branches that just go out in all directions. Quite a neat tree. Somali bunting, beautiful bird. This was another interesting one. This is a group of birds they're called Whydas, W-H-Y-D-A-H, and they all have very, very long tails. The tails are maybe 3 to 4 times the length of the body itself. This one, this picture is not very sharp because it was taken from a great distance, and it was in display though, so I just wanted to show it so you get some sort of an idea of the size of those tail feathers. A lot of the other ones, some of the other Whyda species, the tail feathers, one's called a straw-tailed Whyda, I think, and so they're much thinner than this one particular is. But there were a couple of them that put on a pretty good show for us. Full of pigeons of all kinds, pigeons and doves. This is one of the most common ones. In fact, that one of the first pictures I took out of my hotel window was of one of these things, but we saw them probably every day. A very common bird. Another bee eater type, very distinctive, and they do eat bees. They like bees for sure. This looks like a great blue heron a bit, although the head pattern sure doesn't. But anyway, this is a purple heron. Over what they have over there that looks like our great blue is just called a gray heron. But this is a purple heron, and we had 3 or 4 other kinds of herons: a Goliath heron, a black heron, and a few other black-headed heron. This bird might look a little familiar to some of you because if you have feeders out there or just around town, it's a bird we've only had in the Helena area for maybe 12, 15 years now. It's kind of an invasive bird that's in almost all the lower 48 states now, called a collared dove. The one we have is called a Eurasian collared dove. This is a little bit different. You can see the color on the head is a little different. This is called an African collared dove, so they're closely related. Yeah, just some more miscellaneous birds here. Again, I'm not sure how well you can see. If you look at the eye or the iris on that particular bird, it has a bunch of white. Well, you can't see it very well. But there's a bunch of white spots that kind of outline the iris. And I don't know if that's normal or what, but this particular bird was kind of face to face with another male. And I was just wondering if when they're in some sort of a display position like that, if maybe that iris gets like that. So weaver birds. Weaver birds are very, very common all over this area and to the south. Weaver birds are a bird it's a communal nesting bird that takes grass and other kind of maybe some fine twigs and so forth, and builds around that kind of a nest that they enter from the bottom for the most part. And they're communal, and you might have one tree that might have, 10, 15, 20 of those nests hanging around it. So, but there's there must be 15 or more species of those. So quite common. This one, white-headed buffalo weaver. A number of different kinds of shrikes. This is called a woodchuck shrike. Another reason that I like to take flying pictures, and this is a good example. When a bird is just sitting there and the wings are folded back, you don't get a real feel for the color on those birds. This is an Abyssinian roller, which is an absolutely gorgeous bird when it's sitting there too. But just when it's flying like that, if you're lucky enough to catch something like that, you can see the different shades of blue on there, and just a gorgeous bird. Starlings. And I know you're all familiar with our starlings, and most people kind of are not real friends of starlings, because the only one that we have in this in the lower 48 European starling is not particularly attractive unless you look at it real closely, and then it can be. But anyway, there's probably 15 or more species of starlings in Ethiopia and other areas of Africa. And some of them are just absolutely gorgeous. And if you just look at the name on this one, somebody else thought it was pretty gorgeous when they gave it a name here. So, and they're common. We saw those probably almost every day. So, on the other hand, this bird is a very, very limited distribution. And I can't give you a square mile figure or something like that, but you really got to go to some really local areas to find, well, only one local area to find it, in the very southern part of Ethiopia. And we found them. And as you can tell by looking, it looks a little bit like our Clark's nutcracker. There's some apparently debate as to whether it is in the corvid family, the crow and raven family, or what family it's in. But anyway, it's Stressman's bush crow, and we found them. Another really, and this picture does not do this bird justice, vulturine guinea fowl. Normally when you see these birds, and maybe they're because of their older birds, I'm not sure why, but these feathers that you can see here have blue on them and some white stripe. Normally that comes way down the back. And that pattern of that thing, it just mesmerizes me. I love it. One of my favorite birds. And this bird, unfortunately, doesn't show it as well as it should. Big flocks of these things, 20, 30, 40, 50 of them in one flock. Just some of the other smaller birds here, more eagles. Eagles are easy to take pictures of because they're always sitting up. Another kind of a weaver bird here that's a little bit more distinctive than a lot of the others. A white-rumped babbler. Babblers get their names because they babble and talk a lot. So when some of the areas we went in, or most of the areas we went in, you saw very little tall grass, I guess related to the grazing patterns and the fact that of the drought that they were in. But we did get into a couple of these areas where you can see the grass is a whole lot higher and better, and we were seeing some more of these animals, some pretty impressive looking animals too. This was a real treat one day, driving along and seeing this guy by the side of the road. The only one of that kind. We didn't see a lot of frogs or anything like that, but this tortoise was quite a good find. But probably, I mean, you can't quite get a good feel for the size there, but that thing probably weighed in the 80 to 100 pound bracket. So one of the people tried to pick it up, and you need to be careful. He found out later on, you need to be very careful, because when you try to pick them up like that, they have a defensive mechanism where they urinate on you. And so, so he learned. Primates. Yeah, we had maybe a half a dozen different kinds. This little privet monkey, these guys have figured out that they like food. They like the same kind of food that people like, that we like. And there's a couple of places where we ate that those things are all around. And if you happen to leave your particular lunch or whatever on a plate and aren't real careful, it may disappear by the time you get back there. They're really fast. They'll run up and grab it and then head out. And then this is a high, we had 3 different kinds of baboons. And these are real high altitude ones, apparently, called a galata. And actually, Melissa took this picture because I was trying to get a picture of another bird, and she and some others went up this high ridge, and right over the edge here is a real steep cliff that probably drops down 4,000 or 5,000 feet down into the valley below there. But apparently, these things go down there, and as protection. I'm not sure protection from what, but they go down and they sleep on these real steep cliffs. So an interesting one. Yeah, here's I mean, these are fairly common. And in fact, this is one of those termite mounds that I was telling you about, one of the tall, steep ones. But unfortunately, I didn't get a more distant picture of that one. More raptors, lots of kestrels, different kinds of kestrels. Red-cheeked cordon bleu, not too tough to figure out how they named that one. A Namakwa dove, one of the many different doves, and pigeon species again. This is probably one of the more attractive ones. It's a lot thinner than some of the others, and the feathering on it, and it's more distinctive too. It's pretty easy to tell what that is. These guys are big. And you know, we're a ways away, so I can't tell you how high, but those things must have been 6 feet high at least. They're really tall. There's 2 different kinds of ostriches in Africa, and this one I think is the farther north one. I'm not sure how. I don't know if the other species is in Ethiopia or not. We did not see them. These are the only ostriches we saw. Kingfishers are one of my favorite groups of birds, and the ones that we have in Montana aren't quite as colorful as there are in some other places, but some of these, and of course this one isn't really colorful, but it's really kind of a neat one. But these malachite kingfishers are just gorgeous little things, and almost all the other ones, we had probably 4 or 5 other species of kingfishers, and they're just gorgeous little birds. So. Shorebirds, they get a lot of they get a few of the shorebirds that we have here, but a lot of the shorebirds over there are different from what we normally get here in Montana and in the States. This one happens to be a common green shank, first one of those that I ever had the opportunity to photograph. You're familiar with a couple of what we call the group of birds called night jars, and these are night birds. They come out at night and hunt moths and other, probably maybe mostly moths, but other kinds of night insects, and really hard to find during the day. They kind of fit in camouflage wise and so forth. And we saw 2 different species of these there. And one morning we're going birding on these trips. Every morning you're leaving real early. And anyway, one of the lead vehicles on about a 20-minute drive saw 11 of these things pop off the road. So pretty common in some areas. Lanner falcon, another bird, neat. This was a lot of people wanted to see this bird, and we only saw them once. Bearded vulture. If you just look right there, you can see, I guess, where it got its name. That little beard right there. Just a quick story on these. One of the stories on these is, and one of the older names is called a lammergeier. But anyway, these birds, they're big, great big vulture, raptor type birds. Is when they find some sort of a big animal that's dead, and the bones have been detached from that animal, maybe by some wolves or something like that, they'll go and pick up these bones, and they'll fly up in the air, look in a real rocky area, and they'll drop those bones to break them open so they can get the marrow out of it. Not sure how successful that is, but anyway, that's the story of the bearded vulture or lammergeier. Just some more small birds, attractive things. Yeah, okay, we're getting down toward the end here. So the very last day, we had some special birds to find, and these are the birds right here. So we get up at 4:15 that morning, leave at 4:15, hop on the highway to get there. The highway is under construction. 2 hours and 10 minutes, we were on a road that was just being constructed. It wasn't plain gravel road. It was a rocky road. And we had to get to this place at a certain time or these birds kind of disappear up into the hills. And so anyway, everybody's real nervous and driving a lot faster than we should have been on these gravel roads. But we made it there. There also happened to be some young people there who watched for these birds all the time. They told us exactly where to go. They knew where they were this morning. So we headed up the hill, hopped out of the pickup, and right here is an Urkel's spur fowl just sitting there looking at me. So anyway, that one worked. And then very shortly after that, we saw this other spur fowl called a Harwood's spur fowl. One of my favorite birds, I don't know that it made the top 10 list, but these black crowned cranes. And I don't know, there's something about that crown on those things that just really attracts me. That and this pink cheek patch here. There's not many birds that have pink on them. But anyway, that was one of my favorites. And we just did have an opportunity to see one of those with a young one down here. And now's the bird that everybody wanted to see. It was the top bird, the top pick that people wanted to see when they were there. So we're driving out this morning, probably driving for an hour, pull over on the side of the road, hop out of the vehicle. About 3 minutes later, there's a pair of these things show up right along the side of the road. And hey, I mean, they must have stayed there for 25, 30, 35 minutes entertaining us. They were eating these berries. They were sitting up in a tree. They were calling to us. I got some video of them, which I probably should have put on here. And just a real final, a really final ending. And look at the eyebrows on that thing. So, and then one final picture that I took a little bit earlier, but we had one lake we stayed along, and this lake had hippos in it, hippopotamus. And we'd see them lounging out there, maybe 150 yards out there, and maybe kind of laying on the heads on each other and so forth. I never thought too much of it, but one evening I was out there, and I guess Melissa was out there too. Yeah, we're just walking along kind of the shoreline, and there was another single hippo out there. And this hippo was just looking at me, and he looked at me for probably, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes while I was fiddling along there, taking pictures and so forth out there. And, it turned out to be a fairly decent picture of him. And I got to thinking when I got home and was working on these things, that this needs some sort of a caption. And so if any of you have seen the movie Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, and one of the last scenes in that picture is when Ingrid Bergman is going to fly off with her husband actually, and Humphrey says, "Here, looking at you, kid." And then the other thing that struck me here just recently is, I wonder how you age hippopotamus, and what kind of criteria. If you're looking at a hippopotamus, could you tell what sex it is and its age or anything? Well, I keyed in on the hair on the ears on that thing, and I decided that must be some sort of an old man hippopotamus. So anyway, that's enough of that. Okay, that's it's well, I'm running fast, later than I wanted. But anyway, I'm willing to answer some questions if any. The birds, I think they have. I think they're all converted, as they are in a lot of countries. One person or lots of people? Well, there are committees, And in fact, there's an effort going on right now. There's about 3 or 4 main world bird lists, and each of them are a little bit different, because some of them will consider a bird a species, others consider it a subspecies. Now there's an effort going on by Cornell and these other groups to kind of get everybody together and try to come up with one major list, so that you don't have some of the confusion with bird names. So anyway, go ahead.
I was, as you know, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa, and
Right.
I started recognizing all the same birds that you
Did you really? Yeah.
And they were in, so I looked on eBird while you were talking, while my daughter kept saying, watch the presentation. But I was on the eBird looking at these as you were presenting, and I noticed there was Ethiopia, and then Ghana and Togo, where I was, and then the Jude National Park in Senegal. And so there's like nothing in between, and yet you have the same birds in all 3 spots.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I want to say about that, except maybe you had some thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, they've been around for a long time, and there's probably been, they say the Sahara Desert is expanding now, and so I don't know. But somebody probably has some idea of what it was like 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And maybe that's why, and maybe they've just become isolated. Although that isolation is why we have ended up with more species too, of course. When you get some isolation, then the evolution starts taking place. So yeah. So any more? Yeah.
Did you see any flamingos? Did flamingo habitat?
We did see flamingos. We saw lesser and greater flamingos in one big shallow lake. Yeah, in fact, we saw many hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are online questions in the chat. I'll open that up for you.
Oh, chat. Oh, it was online. Okay. Okay. Hey, this is a new experience here. Now we have some of the people that are watching us now, or that are watching me anyway. How many life birds did you get on this trip? I got probably about 150 life birds, although I haven't come down to a final number on this. And the reason it's so low, we saw like 500, well, the trip total was 508 birds. That's a group total. I probably saw maybe, or you can subtract maybe, 20, 25 of those that I didn't see or get a good look at. So anyway, but the reason I didn't get more is because I've been to Kenya and Tanzania before, and I've been over in the Gambia before in West Africa, where I've seen some of that. So that's the reason I didn't get more. What I did get, however, was probably 150 birds pictures of 150 species that I had never gotten pictures of before. And that's one of my goals, is to get, I shouldn't talk like this. Anyway, that's one of my goals, is to get photos of at least 2,000 bird species. And this put me up somewhere around 1990, I think. So anyway, time of year we were there. Time of year was I think I left on Thanksgiving Day, something like the 24th of November, and just got back on the 14th of December. So we've been back for less than a month. And it was a struggle to get all this. I haven't done this for a while. It was a struggle. They changed, they changed the way you work with some of these PowerPoints and everything. So anyway, long story short, that's enough. So, okay, more. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Hi, Techie here, boy. She keeps me going here. All right. Anyway, okay. Hey, thank you all for coming. It was fun. I love it.
Thank you, Bob. That was awesome.
Okay, tell Kathy that. Okay.
Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you on Valentine's Day to learn more about conservation ranching. If you have a few minutes to stay and help stack up the chairs, that'd be great. And we especially appreciate the young people being here tonight from the Peak program. Bob's granddaughter, I get it wrong, Rayleigh, is a freshman in high school, and she's a major IT person, has been of great help. Give her a hand.